Hi, my name is Rataka, and in this video we talk about why do Indians hate themselves so much. So recently I was browsing through X, formerly known as Twitter, and there are three categories of Indians that I found on this app. And I'm not speaking for everybody, but this is a general observation that I have made on any social media platform where there's a possibility of interaction between Indians and foreigners. So the three kinds of Indians that I found on X was number one, the one who were trying to prove that they were not like other Indians. So these were essentially people, when there's a video of an Indian man, Indian tourist in any foreign countries who lacks civic sense or who misbehave with women who come to visit India, these Indians try to prove that they're not like other Indians. So whatever racism that is associated with Indians, for example, that they smell, eat certain foods, they stink, they speak language in a certain way, they talk in a certain way, these Indians try to prove that they're not like other Indians, and they are hence more civilized and more educated than what the larger population of Indians seem to be doing on the internet. The second kind are the one who are apologizing for the behavior of these Indians. So these Indians come forward apologizing on behalf of the other Indians, saying that they are not only ruining the name of India, but the larger Indian population does not behave this way, and there is only certain category of people who are behaving that way, and they necessarily do not represent India as a whole. There's another third kind of Indians that you find on X, and this is perhaps one of the most interesting sort of Indians, the one who team up with these racist people, especially racist foreigners online who are instigating a war against Indian and participate in the racism that is being meted out on Indians. So these people start by agreeing to what foreigner thinks of India as perverted, Indians as dirty, Indians as callous, malicious, whatever, and they also share their own instances with Indians, saying that yeah, Indians are like that, I have experienced this. So Indians teaming up with other racist foreigners, trying to team up against Indians, especially people of their own country, in trying to portray themselves as victims of the people of their own country. However, what is common in all the three types of Indians that you find online is that they have internalized the racist remarks that people of other countries or foreign countries have passed on us, and they react on the basis of that. So they not only think Indians are like that, but they also feel as if it is their responsibility to prove that Indians are not like that. So the racism has been internalized so much so that they do not see it as racism, but they view themselves as how the foreigners view them. There's a very famous critic in post-colonial theory called Frantz Fanon, and he writes a book called Black Skin, White Mask. So this book is divided into, I think, 7 chapters or 9 chapters, and he discusses a multitude of topic in this book. But I think one thing which is very similar to what he says in the book and what I'm trying to cull out in this video is how racism is internalized so much so that the colonial subject or the colonized only view themselves as the colonizer views them. They have not only internalized how the colonizers view them, but they also start viewing themselves as how the colonizers view them. So the racism is not only internalized, but one only views themselves as the white folks or the people who they seem are culturally superior to them view them. Okay, so there are few things which I find very interesting on social media, especially on X. So there's somebody called Dr. Ruchika Sharma, and what she talks about is a trailer of Ramayana which has come forward starring Ranbir Kapoor. What she talks about in this tweet of hers is how we have internalized and idealized the Eurocentric view of what one deems attractive so much so that we are not only able to see our gods as what they were truly like. There's this whitewashing of everything and everybody, online, offline, even our gods. So she says Ram is fair-skinned with Jimbro abs and biceps, even though he's famous as Sham Varn, dark-skinned and lean. What civilizational insecurity leads people of religion to ditch Indian standards of beauty and throw Greco-Romanian ideals of male beauty? Why do they hate Indian history so much? So she is basically critiquing the representation of Ram, which I am pretty sure is made in such a way to reach to the broader masses in our country, which are also obsessed with fair skinned, white skin, leaner bodies, which are the modern standards of beauty, and has nothing to do with the actual representation of how Lord Ram would have been, or how Lord Ram has been described in the books. I think one thing which is also very interesting is that if you look online or if you try to search why do Indians hate themselves so much, so there's something called the sepoy mentality, the theorization of which I couldn't find even though I tried my best to. What the word I think actually means is that we are still in a colonial hangover, and I think a lot of people talk about it, that while the Britishers had left us a long time ago, we do not seem to be over it, and there is a neo-imperialism which has happened. We are dominated by American social medias, whether it's X, whether it's Instagram, whether it's YouTube. So if you look at something called the Met Gala or the Coachella, although it has nothing to do with us and only a couple of Indians are able to go, especially influencers are able to attend such prestigious events, there seems to be an obsession with all these things because primarily our culture is shaped by social media, which is rooted in a foreign country. I think there's also an obsession with otherness, and we keep whiteness at the center and view ourselves from the periphery as the other. While we have internalized the gaze of the colonizers, we also do not seem ourselves as worthy, and there's always this attempt to look better, especially if you look at, there's a trend which is going on Instagram where you'll see that all these boys attempt to make bodies and they work out. The reason for working out is only to look better, fit into the Western standard of what one deems as beauty, and not to actually be healthy. I think the problem is that the focus is on looking good. I'm not talking about everybody who's on gym, but especially the incel males who propagate that the only way forward is the alpha male, and their goal of what they deem as alpha male is particularly driven by the Western standard of beauty. The point that I was trying to make is that we have kept the white beauty standards or the foreign beauty standards at the center of it, and we view ourselves from the periphery and we gaze ourselves through the lens which is predominantly not ours. I think another thing I have seen is the obsession of Indians with English. Knowing English or being in control of the language also connotes that you are from certain class, and that is why Indians are so obsessed with knowing English. But if you look at a general UN meeting, you'll see French representatives speak in French, but I think a lot of Indians only use English as their medium of talking. Why do I say Indians hate themselves is because even if you look at our culture or what is happening around us, we are very driven by looking white. So I recently got into makeup and I love makeup products, and because now I start following beauty influencers, that I realize that a lot of beauty influencers come forward to talk about how the foundations that you see do not cater to the larger population of India. They are only for 5-6 fairer skin tones. They do not have the shade range to match the wider population of India. Even if you look at the clothes which one shops at H&M or back when I was young, Forever 21, those clothes were not made for the Indian body type. There was a research which was published that Indians tend to store fat in their bellies because there had been so many famines during the British Raj, because of which they have a protruding belly. A lot of men and women have protruding bellies, they have wider hips, they have wider arms. The clothes that you see in all these US based companies which are sold in India only cater to one sort of body types and are essentially not made for the Indian body type. While I talk about foundation, it is also imperative that I talk about Fair and Lovely, which is now I think being sold as Fresh and Lovely or some other sort of a cream. It guaranteed that people who use these creams could become fairer in a couple of months of the usage of the cream. While the cream might not be the problem, the idea that it is trying to sell is that fairer is better, that brighter is better. That is some aspiration that people need to have, that people need to be. And if you are not that, there's something really wrong with you. We are brought up in a culture, we are brought up in a setting which is essentially made so that we can never like ourselves. So we start hating ourselves, trying to become something which is not possible bodily, physically, emotionally, culturally, because we are built different. Things which I think is that how obsessed we are with the foreign culture. For example, when Queen died, I know of so many people who post a story about them, but do we know of our own royals? Mamdani was running for the mayor elections in New York. While this XYZ certain person from Delhi wouldn't know about who to vote in their own constituency, they were all rooting for Mamdani. For example, the Black Lives Matter movement that happened in India. I remember people were changing their displays on Instagram and they all were putting the status called Black Lives Matter. A lot of celebrities had done that. A lot of Indians had done that. Not realizing that the minorities in our countries, whether it's the Dalit or Bahujan Samaj or the tribal community, had been suffering. How many of us know that in 3 states right now in India, there are protests happening by tribal communities?
On finit toujours par trouver. Elle dit qu'il n'est jamais très loin, qu'il part très souvent travailler. Maman dit travailler.
Is the point that I'm trying to make. Another thing that you see is I was very irked by as a child was if you'd go to any beautiful place in India, there was always a connotation ki oh, this is not India, this is the Switzerland of India. What is the problem if it is just India? Why is only beauty appreciated when it is at power with some foreign country? For something to be beautiful, for someone to appreciate something, why does it has to have the same connotation of beautification, of respectability to a place in a foreign country? Why can't we just appreciate the beauty of our own country by the virtue of it being in our country? Why does its beauty have to be paralleled with the beauty of another country to be deemed worthy of our affection? I think another thing which I find is on Twitter, on X especially, is that Indians hate other Indians. So I was going through Reddit while trying to find material for this post. So there is this Reddit thread on Ask India where this person talks about how there's this foreigner who says ki why do Indians hate themselves so much? There's a conversation going on where somebody says that no, Indians don't hate themselves, they just hate Indians who do not behave a certain way. Proves the point that I'm trying to make in the first part of the video. When I was editing or when I was writing the script for the video, there were approximately 1474363 Indians and counting. So there are so many people in India, and while we might follow the same culture, we might follow the same religion and speak the same language, just by the virtue of being geographically located in different places, the thought process is very different. The way one sees the world, the resources that one has, one gets growing up, changes a lot of perspective, a lot of things in one's life. So essentially there's no one way of being an Indian, quote unquote. So when somebody misbehaves or when somebody behaves a certain way, there's a tendency in people to kind of attribute that behavior to certain class and caste and say no, we are better than that. Others behave like this, but this is not the correct representation of Indians because there are other people in India. People attempt to resist homogenization by saying that no, this is not Indian, we are Indian. But in reality, there's no correct way of being Indian. When somebody says that this person lacks civic sense, not be taken as a critique against the whole community of Indians, because people are culturally, figuratively, historically, socially, religiously, geographically very different from one another, even by the virtue of being Indian. And it should be taken as a critique of that person who's behaving a certain way. For example, after the Epstein files came out, nobody says that all Americans are perverts. No one is saying all Americans behave a certain way. It is a critique of the rich and the powerful who were involved and whose name has come in the file and who are complicit in the crime. Similarly, there's no one way of being Indians. India is a diverse country and people, I think, sometimes forget that. And we always associate, even in India, because there's so much caste system, there's so much class differences in the country, that we hate each other, that we cannot tolerate one another, we cannot tolerate difference in opinions, we cannot tolerate people who behave differently from us. So there's always this assertion on Twitter to prove that that person is not the correct representation of India, but I am the correct representation of India. Where in reality, nobody is the correct representation of India. We are a country which is diverse in the best and the worst way possible. So some tweets that I found a lot of people talking about are I saw this tweet which really broke my heart, which was about most common faces used by Hollywood to represent Indians, and he said scam wali phenotype. Exactly the point that I was trying to make, that we associate color, we associate behaviors to certain class and caste, and deem ki this is not the representation of my class, so this is not the representation of India. Also the idea that for us, we are very crippled by the very standardized Western idea of beauty, which you see in the way how Lord Ram is depicted, how our beauty products work, how the clothes that we are sold works, and anything which is not that is ugly to us. A heavier body is ugly to us. A darker skin tone is ugly to us. So for example, the calm Wali phenotype that this Twitter person is talking about. There's also this idea that when somebody as an Indian talks about their experiences of being in India, whether being sexually assaulted or being molested or being treated by the larger population, there's an outcry which happens which says that India has a strong rape culture with Swadesh music in the background, when India has 15 times lower rape rate than in the US. As if that is a standard we are trying to meet, that it is only an emergency when we are worse than what is happening in the US. There's always a criticism of Indians by Indians, and there's a tug of war happening about who represent India. When there is no representation of India, but only the representation of individuals in general. Oh, and he also goes on to body shames this by women by calling her fat, ugly, entitled, and also obnoxious, reiterating and proving the point that I've been trying to make in the second part of the video. There's another tweet where said got mocked by Indian ugly, and there are pictures of two Indians who are, to me they are very pretty, but they are of darker skin tone, so I think it is a critique against the color which is not fairer. I mean, I try to also find and look for a division of how we are segregated on the basis of the color of our skin or the melanin in our skin, but there was not a lot of research which has been done on it, and I couldn't decipher any. But most of these Indians are largely brown and darker brown in shape. We have internalized this hate on darker skin tone so much, so never realizing that a lot of us are darker in color. I think what is very predominant is that Indians believe, some Indians on Twitter believe, or some Indians who advocate that Indians are great online believe that their way of being Indian is the only way of being Indian, and everything which does not represent how they think, believe, look, place where they come from are not the fair representation of India. So to sum up what I've been trying to say in the video is that Indians hate themselves so much because one, we have internalized the racism that we had put up with for 150 years. We still are in a colonial hangover where we think that the Britishers or the fair-skinned people are so much better than us, never realizing that, for example, Sudan was colonized till 2011, and the British government gave Slave Compensation Act, where when slavery was abolished in 1800s, this act was passed to compensate white folks who had slaves and who had to let go of the slaves. So the government was paying money to these slave owners who had to let go of their slaves after slavery was abolished about till 2015. So this deep-rooted roots of colonialism in our country, and we still haven't gotten out of it yet. Not to talk about the indentured labor which happened after that. Also the idea that Indians hate not only themselves, but they hate other Indians who they seem do not represent the idea of what they deem India is, never realizing that there's no one way of being Indian, that we are boxed so much so that we feel as if the only way that we behave, think, talk, understand, listen, look like is the only actual way of being, never realizing that the country which has the largest population of the world is very different in ways beyond which that we'll be able to ever understand or realize. Yeah, with this we come to the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you guys think. See you next time. Bye bye.